Do your emotions wreak havoc in your life, and are they preventing you from getting what you want? Well, if that's you, do me a favor, stick around, because that's what we're talking about on today's show.
Your mind is a beautiful thing, but if left unattended, it can get ugly real quick. If you're not constantly curating the content your mind consumes on a daily basis, then your surroundings will dictate your daily thoughts, habits, behaviors, and actions. This show has only one goal: to leave your mind more beautiful than it was when you arrived. Welcome to the Beautiful Mind Show.
What's going on? Thanks for joining me today. I am Jason Everett and excited to have you on. Excited to have my guest on with me today as well. And if you're hanging out with us live, would you do me a favor and just comment in the comment section and say live and type in the city that you're on live from? I'd love to give you a shout out and just acknowledge you for showing up today. But I want to bring on somebody who's really special because this person has actually been a personal coach of mine for years and years and has personally helped me to achieve things that I never thought were possible or that I thought were way off in the distance, and they've happened way quicker than I expected, all because of lots of people in my life, but one of them in particular who's on with me today. Her name is Sanford. Please welcome to the show, Seal from the Advanced Coaching and Leadership Center. What's going on, Seal? How are you?
Hey, I'm good. It's so great to be on this call with you all today. Thank you so much.
It's so good to have you on today. And Seal is actually one of my personal coaches. In fact, I talk with Seal probably, 2, 3, sometimes more times per month, depending on what's going on. And I get on and do one-on-one sessions with her to actually help me kind of figure out what's going on. Now, it's been asked Seal. Some people are like, well, is Seal like your psychiatrist? Is she like, she like your like mentor for things? Like, how does it work? And it always can be difficult to describe. But what I like to tell people is like everybody has emotional hangups and hiccups and things that create challenges for them. And what I do is I get on the phone with you and we work through the things that come up and cause reactions in my life that I want to respond better to. That's the best way I can describe it. How do you describe it?
Well, what I describe it is, we always focus on, I always ask you, what do you want? And then I ask you positive questions to help you unravel. So why aren't you getting what you want? What's blocking you? And that's really the short of it.
It's such a simple answer. Like, I ask you positive questions and we deal with it. But it's like there's so much depth and so many layers, and it's crazy to me that literally we get on the phone, you ask hundreds of questions or dozens of questions, and they're just the right questions to really make me go, dang it, that's what it is. And every time I have a session, right, it's constantly I had never thought of it that way, or I just didn't think about it. And it's not that you're on giving me advice, because you are not an advice dealer like most coaches are, right? Like most coaches would say, oh, you have that problem? Well, here's 5 things you need to do. Here's the 12 steps to handle this. Here's the 18 things to do that. And you don't do that. You just literally are like, all right, how would you handle that? And what would be this? And have you ever thought about this? And have you done that? And I get off the call and I'm like, holy crap, that was exactly what I needed. And it was just from the questions that you asked. So anyway, if you've ever had questions asked to you and they were eye-opening, would you do me a favor, type in the chat, eye-opening, because I love questions that get people's attention and get you to think. Seal, we're just before the show, we were talking about some things going on. I really think that your emotions can drive a lot of not just your decisions, but also your ability to grow. And the thing I want to talk about on the show was, how do you lift your emotions and lift your life? Because how do you see emotions playing out in day-to-day decisions for the average person, no matter whether they're trying to make a decision about hiring a new person or growing to a $100 million company? Emotions can get super messy. How do you deal with emotions?
That's a great question. So the first thing to do is for a person to inspect their mood, if you will. Emotion is always consisting of some type of mood or maybe several moods, right?
Right.
And you're going to laugh at this, Jason, but I can choose to go in there and sweep the kitchen floor, and I can choose to do it in a drudgery mood level, which is going to take me so much longer, or I can do it in a passionate mood level. And what? I'm going to have a sparkling floor that's going to be filled with love, do it a lot faster, and on about my day. So your mood really predicts what kind of future you're going to have. It reminds me of someone that we both know who's very successful in real estate. I asked him, when you hire someone, do you look at their credentials? What's your main thing you're looking for? And he said, I'm looking at their attitude, and your mood is consistent of the mood and attitude. And because he said, I have to train them, and that's the way I look at it.
Right. Well, and it does make a big difference. I mean, it is funny when you talk about mood and attitude in general. Is like, my current assistant who's checking out, hanging out, and monitoring the show today, right? Is like, I've had people who have been at the front desk when I walk in the door, and they're like grumpy and angry when I get to work, and then that'll change the mood for the entire office for the entire day. Or like I said, my current assistant who's like super happy, cheery, good morning, what's going on? Like, and genuinely so can change the attitude of the entire office with that mood. And there's so many things, Seal, that like get in the way of our mood, right? Like you and I were talking about this the other day. It's like my car broke down the other day, right? Like, and I was like, I'm right in the middle of buying a new car, and I can't find the right car that I want to buy. And so my car breaks down. I'm like, sign from the universe that it's time for a new car. And I think it just needs a battery. Like, that's all it needs, right? It just needs a battery. But it's just like you can either have all of that trauma and drama like weigh you down and bog you down, and then all of a sudden I can't make a decision that would help guide the company because I'm dealing with the battery in a car because of my emotional response to a triggered thing that starts setting me and like sets people like, am I the only one? You guys, do you get emotionally triggered like this? If you do me a favor and say triggered in the chat, because that's the kind of BS that like prevents me from being as awesome as I'd like to be because I get triggered, right? And that's what causes those triggers, Seal? I mean, we've talked about this a lot, but like, what causes triggers? Why do some people get triggered when I say cat food and other people don't get triggered when I say cat food? Why?
Well, obviously, there's usually some kind of incident. If you use a cat food,
I just thought I'd give you a good analogy. Yeah.
But like the car, going to your car story, you probably had an intention of where you wanted to be that day, and it wasn't tied up with handling a battery problem, which set in motion a whole other string of events that got slowed down or stopped, right? Right. So you can it's the important thing is, how did you react? How did you react to that? Did you react in an explosive?
Right. Well, I did get a little angry. And here's the thing I think is fascinating, right? Is as you deal with these things at different levels, Seal, like you can handle one thing and then it can come up again in a different way later. And like, as you're evolving and people are growing, like you hit these thresholds. So talk to me about that for a second, because I think you had mentioned you were just listening to a training by Alan Walters, who's been a mentor of yours. I never met Alan. I've just read a lot of his material and I've studied a lot of his stuff, but he was talking about how in life, as you continue to excel, you hit these block points. Can you share a little bit more about that for us?
Yeah. So, one of the things that he mentioned that I thought was quite interesting is as people get more successful and really go up all the way to the top, let's take somebody that keeps hitting a fixed ceiling, right? Let's say they want to make, $10 million a year. And let's say that they can't get over the 3 million mark. Okay. So obviously there's some kind of hidden or some kind of mindset there that they're probably not aware of, but they sure as hell know that there's a fixed ceiling, if you will.
Yeah.
So
like they can experience it.
Yeah, before they can get through that mindset, before they get through that ceiling and get over that 3 million mark, you've got to find the mindset, because they're obviously not thinking in a prosperous mindset. They don't have a beautiful mind, as you would say, Jason. They're stuck there. So does that make sense?
It does. Now, I have to throw this out here because, look, I was one of those people who, I grew up in a personal development household, right? Like I call it personal development Thanksgiving. I went to those type of places. And so I had personal development. I kind of ran away from it, and then I got involved with it more. And now I love it. It's a part of what I do every day. There are lots of people out there, Seal, that say, personal development's a bunch of crap. As soon as you learn, the systems and stuff that you need to put in place, you just got to power through the mindset and just do it. That's not been my experience. Is it like, if I don't work on my mind, I have challenges and issues and it doesn't get me where I want to go? What do you say to the person that's like, mindset's a bunch of crap. You just need to just get on with it already. What does that say about them? What does it say about like the industry? Like help me understand that, because I think a lot of people just kind of blow off the mindset part of this.
Well, for that person, Jason, probably, you know, what I would say about that is that they have a fixed mindset, but beyond that is they have tried something along the way that
Mm,
has influenced them that probably didn't work and
yeah,
that they
they did
invested
some
in.
mindset work.
That's
Hmm.
right. And that they lost in it. It didn't work. It didn't change. So obviously, doesn't, you know what I mean? They
Right.
formulated. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like they've built their own story around why and again, like I guess even in my story, right? Like my mindset was I've been in personal development Thanksgiving, so mindset was a bunch of crap until I started really doing mindset work. And you mentioned positive processing. I'd been exposed to a lot of negative processing to
Yeah.
like bring up all these fears and resistance. And I think that's what happens, right? Is people get around people and they have a bad experience. And it's just like I think that you've mentioned this analogy before. It's like touching a hot stove, right? It's like you touch a hot
Yeah.
stove and you learn that stoves are bad. But maybe it's
Yeah.
like the same thing as like you try personal development and it burns you, or the person who's in charge of personal development has got a messed up life, right? Like they are an a-hole,
Totally.
or like they've
Hmm.
cheated on somebody, or they've
Right.
they've screwed people over and left them hanging. And then you now make an assignment in your mind that personal development is bad because of your experience with that person, and then all of a sudden all personal development is bad. Why is it, Seal, that we make that assignment that we can't say, oh, okay, look, like on our own usually, that it's not personal development's bad, it's just that one experience was bad? Why do we naturally assign value to everything as the same? And I don't know if I said that right, but does that make sense? Like we make it global?
Yeah. Well, I want to use you for an example if I can. So you grew
Yeah,
up in a
that's fine.
household where there's a lot, where there's a lot of personal development, right? There was a lot
Yeah.
of personal development. And I don't know if this happened, but I'm assuming that probably um, it was maybe enforced or suggested. So do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, it was
Was that the
enforced. It
case?
was never an
Yeah.
option. It was always,
Yeah.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was forced.
Okay, so I don't care if it's a child, if it's a middle-aged student, or if it's an adult. Nobody likes to have stuff
Yeah.
enforced on them. That's why, you know, sometimes wives will come see us. They're like, my husband needs to come see you. Then she harps on the husband back. You need to talk to my husband. Well, that
Right,
husband's
right.
probably not going to come see me because she's trying to enforce that, vice versa. The husband trying to
Right.
enforce the wife. You know,
Yeah.
it's called power of choice. That's a negative process. You resist
Right.
it. Does that make? I mean, that's the biggest
Yeah.
hindrance.
Yeah, I mean, I remember Blair, who introduced us, Blair Singer, who introduced us. He had a definition of abuse, which was to give somebody something they don't want and or don't need. Right, that's one of the definitions of abuse, or prevent people from getting something that they do want and or do need.
Yeah.
And I've heard that from
Mhm.
Blair. I've heard it from you. And I think that idea, and I don't mean abuse as in physical abuse, but just the idea of giving something that they don't want. Like, here, I'm going to force personal development on you, even though you don't want it, you're not interested in it. Like, I can't tell my wife to the same thing, hey, Charity, I need you to go have session with Seal, period. If she wanted to, then fantastic. But if she didn't want to, then I can't force it. I think a lot of people, operate from that regard, and then that creates a negative situation, a bad thing, and then it starts making it global. And again, I'm not, and maybe I should just ask it in a slightly different way, but like, why is it that when we hear that type of example, we then globalize it and it becomes all examples to us? Is that a shortcut? Is it like what in your mind creates it so that like we see another situation as exactly the same?
So usually, if I understand that right, usually when people don't know about something, right, or it's new or
Mhm.
it's foreign to them, they usually revert to what they do know. And if what they do know
Oh,
is negative, which a lot of times it is a negative
right.
experience sitting there, they don't have what you will a clean area or a clean slate, so to speak, to view that from. They're viewing it
Got
from an
it.
old fixed idea or an old fixed way of thinking, but they're unaware of it. Does that make sense? So until you
Yes, yes,
ask the right
totally,
question, not make them wrong for it, make it very safe for them to
totally.
inspect it, and then live by example, then they, that helps to discharge those emotions and it
Yes.
smooths on it. Does
So
that
let's
help?
do this. It does. And I want to find out from you, Seal, how can you ask questions to get people excited to actually hear from you? Like I want, what can we do to kind of invite people into that reality? But I got to take a quick break. We'll be back in just under 60 seconds. Stick around, and then we'll talk about what kind of questions can you ask to get people involved in working on themselves, all after we come right back.
Would you like to have an even more beautiful mind? Well, we'd like you to have one, and we actually created a 7-day Beautiful Minds Challenge, which is a little bit of a choose your own adventure challenge for just 7 days. And I really think you can do anything for 7 days. It's definitely not easy, but it will be simple for you to get access to it. All you have to do is comment anywhere on this video or send me a message on social media that says 7-day, and I'll send you immediate access to not only our Beautiful Minds Facebook group, but also our Beautiful Minds Challenge, where you can go through 3 different areas: your mental health, your emotional health, and your physical health, and get challenges in each of those areas that'll help you get a handle on each of those areas inside your life to give you more control over what you want to do every single day. So do me a favor, comment 7-day or send me a message on any social media, and I'll make sure I give you access to our exclusive community group as well as access to the challenge. Thanks so much, and now back to the show.
Hey guys, welcome back. I'm chatting with Seal Sanford, and one of my personal coaches, good friends, and just amazing person who's just made it her entire life study to work on what triggers people. How do we get emotional responses out of the way so we can move forward and create the lifestyle that we want? And we were just chatting about what triggers people in the first place. What are the negative experiences that were maybe forced on us, or that we had a bad experience with, and then we now assign that value to everything around us, right? We started saying, well, all personal development is bad because this one personal development is bad, and the shortcuts that we take in our mind. And I wanted to ask you, Seal, when we came back from the break, what are some things you can do to start waking people up out of this, like snapping them out of their patterns and their habits and the things that they're doing? If they're like, hey, I don't even want to talk about personal development, are there any just starter questions that we can get to have better discussions with people about these topics when they get triggered on things?
Okay, so I'm going to give you a question, then I'm going to give you an example. So a great question would be, so what does this trigger remind you of? Trigger or remind you of? Now that seems like really simple, but how does that fit into real life? So basically, I had someone that was spending some time with myself, and she was about 11 years old, and she had bought some gifts, and I said, hey, here's these receipts. Do you want these receipts? And she says, no, I hate receipts.
Oh, interesting. So came up real big, like big emotion with the receipt. I hate receipts.
Oh, wow. She's 10 years old. She hates receipts. So I'm like, I better ask her a processing question. I was like, I better ask her a processing question. So I said, what do receipts trigger remind you of? And she stopped and she looked. I mean, she thought about it. She said, they remind me of money I shouldn't have spent. And I was like, wow, for someone 10 years old, went right to the answer is money she should not have spent. And I'm like, how simple is that? That's all I asked her. Just money I shouldn't have spent. I'm like, interesting.
Yeah, well, and so I think there's something freeing in the release. And again, that's a great example of like, you just asked a question to figure out what it was that triggered that. Because I think, you know, I've heard my kids do that. And by the way, that's one of my favorite questions to use, because I've heard that lots of times, right? That's one of my favorite questions to use on my kids when they say something like, you know, Dad, I hate this, or I hate that, or what. And because, you know, my kids are 4 and 7. So they're in the bus of like hating things. It's like, you know, if I tell them they can't have ice cream, they're like, I hate you, right? Like they're kind of in that mode about something. And I go, well, why? And they're like, well, because, and sometimes they have a really good logical reason for why they were triggered by that moment. They're like, well, because you promised that today, after we did this, we were going to have a reward or whatever. And like, they tell me something very logical and very brilliant. And I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. Interesting. And I triggered them because in their mind, they had a set way that it was supposed to go. And I broke that with them. And then they have their own experience. And I think it can be so revealing, not just for the person that's asked the question, but also for the person who's been asked the question, right? Is both of them get to have that realization about what it reminded them of in general, right? Yeah, I think it's such a clean question. Advice though, because I think people can say like, hey, Seal, I hate Chinese food or something. I don't know, whatever it is. I hate Chinese food. And you go, and you go, oh, does that remind you of something? And there's a wrong way to do this too, right? What's the wrong way to do this? Because you could really piss somebody off and maybe get punched in the face if you do this wrong,
Well,
right?
talk about the emotions. So it all goes back to your mood level. If you ask me, so what's wrong with Chinese? I would probably want to slap you. But if you said, so what's wrong with Chinese food? Does this remind you of anything?
In a positive, friendly,
like really,
neutral.
yes,
Yeah.
really wanting to know,
Yeah.
not to make me wrong.
Right.
You know, so
Yeah. So just make sure it's
yeah.
a positive mood. Otherwise you are going to get them. Because I think people know if you're trying to, like, I hear sometimes people will learn a piece of tech sealed, like they'll learn a question like that. And they're like, I've asked everybody that question. They always come back at me angry. I'm like, well, because you're using it like a weapon. Do you know what I mean?
You.
Like you're using it like a weapon to be like, oh, what does that remind you of? And all of a sudden they're like, oh, I don't even want to tell you. And they kind of clam up, right? They clam up and they feel like they're being interrogated. And they're like, I'm not going to tell you because you're going to use that against me. And I would also say that's its own trigger in of itself. Is what that says about you is that you probably weaponized information against that person in the past, right? And they know that you're using it to weaponize. So how do you make sure you have the right tone, the right attitude? And by the way, if this is helpful for you guys, if you guys are learning something right now, throw some exclamation marks up in the chat. I want to make sure that you guys are learning some good stuff from Seal today. And if you guys have questions, please ask, because I want to make sure they get answered. Seal, do you have any other questions that are really good questions to just open people up when they feel resistant or they feel blocked by something or you feel like they've just shut down on you?
Yeah, ask them. You can ask them, is what you're talking about reminding them of something? That's a simple question. Or what's understanding? Like, let's take somebody that doesn't really understand what they're learning. You can simply ask them, so what's your comprehension of what your understanding of this? See, that's very non-threatening. It's not invasive.
Right.
It doesn't feel like school was, painful for most people. But asking them, what's your understanding of this? I mean, ask me what my understanding of math is, and I'll tell you not anything. I hate numbers. So, I need a lot of questions asked about that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But to your point, it's ask the question and just say, so what, what's your understanding on that? Like, what do you know about it now? And just asking the question, or like, I like, you kind of slid this one in, right? Which was, what does it remind you of? But then you also said, what does this process remind you of? Or what does this situation remind you of? Or like, does this remind you of something else that you've done before? And again, only from an inquisitive, positive sort of mindset. Otherwise you're going to continue to trigger them.
Yeah, because what I'm ultimately trying to do is take whatever has been triggered from the past, which is usually a negative, and I'm trying to get them to locate it. And then once they tell me, it's kind of like taking a box and chunking it over there. Then they're in present time, and I'm being present with them. And that's the biggest thing. Does that make sense? Because they're back there.
Yeah, completely.
They're not here.
Yeah, they're still stuck on the item. They're stuck on whatever item they were just thinking about. They're no longer talking with you. They're thinking about something that was from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or 3 weeks ago, whatever it was. And they're no longer in that normal conversation. So by asking the question, you could bring them into the present, bring them up to where you are, and have a genuine conversation with them. Yeah, this is good stuff, Seal. Any processing questions you can ask yourself that are helpful? Like if you had to give me, if I said, hey, I want to do some mental processing and figure out what's triggering me, is there anything I could do to like ask myself some questions internally, whether written or just asking out loud, that would help me move forward and figure out if I'm hitting the threshold and I can't move out of it?
Yeah. Excuse me. So if you're hitting the threshold, like in a fixed ceiling situation, one of the questions you could ask yourself, and I ask this a lot of times, people who are being really successful. So what's likely to happen if you were to become really, really, really successful? Or what's likely to happen if you were to really hit that goal of, I don't know, take someone wanting to make $1 billion? You know what I mean? Oh,
yeah.
Well,
what's likely to happen if you do that?
Yeah. Sometimes it's your reluctances turn on when you get up into those really higher stakes, bigger games, bigger goals. Reluctances you didn't even know you had, if you will. So that's what's it reminding you of, or what's likely to happen?
That's
You
another
know,
good question. So what's
yeah,
likely to happen? And then would you run, like, just from my familiarity with it, but like, would you just keep asking yourself that question? What else is likely to happen? What else? Like, would you kind of run that until you get a couple triggers in there, or like, what would help kind of exhaust that so somebody could get value out of it?
So I'm thinking, let me think about this for a second. So I
Yeah.
asked this a few years ago, and this person was really trying to maintain that higher state. It just couldn't maintain it. So finally, I just threw a question. So what's likely to happen if you were to live in that space and you were to be really, really successful? And his fear was that he would actually do something naughty, like cheat on his wife, or do you know what I mean? Like we see so
totally.
much of that stuff in the media: drugs, alcohol, gambling, doing things they shouldn't do. And so that's a fear, right?
Yeah.
So,
I'm worried if I become that successful, then I might do something stupid because whatever would happen. I mean, I've had that thought too of like, I don't, I've seen that. And part of it was because I'd only been around people who had a lot of money that did stupid things once they had money. So part of my fear was that I would become that stupid person when money was flooded into my life. And I've had to do a lot of work on that, because if I don't, then I'm just stuck forever somehow, like subconsciously resisting the threshold because I'm worried that that's going to happen. So I can completely relate to that comment. And if you guys can too, if you've ever had a point of resistance that you didn't break through because you were worried about something that could happen, or maybe that's a good realization for you, comment me in the chat if it's been helpful for you. And Seal, this is like, man, if I told people that were watching the show, this is the number one thing that has been helpful for me to grow, and especially with my partner. I mean, Seal works with me and my partner in business, and it's an arrangement that both of us have to work on this stuff in our lives in order for us to be partners together. In fact, it's in our partnership agreement that we both have to do this type of work, because what can very often happen, we'll have an argument and we will get triggered, or we'll trigger each other on something, and it'll cause a fight. Right? You've never had that happen with a spouse, right, listener? Right? So you've never had that happen, is you get triggered in a fight, and then you don't realize that you're arguing over something that you could handle on your own. And so with Doug and I, in our business relationship, we make sure that we both are working on ourselves to get rid of that stuff. And so I can't recommend it enough. Seal, where can people go to maybe take some assessments from you guys or check it out? Where could they go and get some resources from you guys?
Oh, thanks, Jason. So you can go to www.knowledgeism.com. That's knowledgeism.com.
Perfect.
And we have a lot of free materials on that's just helpful for people to read. Or you can go to aclc.us.com as well.
Nice. Yeah. And check that out. There's also, they do something called a life skills assessment. I don't know if it's okay, I'm talking about that. They do this really cool thing called a life skills assessment that actually shows you where your mentality is in different areas and kind of where you're tripping yourself up. I actually take all of our staff through that assessment. It's a really powerful tool to let me know where they are, but more importantly for them to know where they are in order for them to realize where they need to come up out of, what they're doing well in, and what they can improve. So thank you so much for being on the show today, Seal. I really, really appreciate it. Yeah, if you can put that up on the screen for me, there it is, knowledgeism.com. You can go get the rest of the information on that. There, tons of free resources, tons of good resources for you to use for you and your team. Seal, thank you so much for being on today. I appreciate being able to show everybody here.
Thank
All right,
you
guys,
so much.
have a great week. Thank you, Seal, for being here. I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.
Thank you, Jason. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us on today's show. If you want to get access to our 7-day Beautiful Minds Challenge, you can either comment below and just say 7-day, and I'll shoot you the information so you can get immediate access to that, or find me on any social media and just send me the message 7-day, and I'll make sure I get that out to you right away. And if you really enjoyed today's show, it would do me a huge favor if you went online, whether it was Spotify, Pandora, or iTunes, or any sort of podcast platform that you can find us on, and search for The Beautiful Minds Show, subscribe to our channel, and then make sure you give us a rating. Every time you give us a rating, it helps us get more eyeballs on our show and help more people have a more beautiful mind. Thanks again for joining us.